The flam is an important rudiment for any drummer to learn. In fact, 10 out of the 40 rudiments require you to know about the flam. Simply stated, the flam is one big daddy note preceded by a tiny baby note. And that looks something like this, except we call the big daddy note the primary note, and the note preceding it the grace note. So how do we get those big daddy and tiny baby notes? Let me show you. Take your sticks like this, place them above the drum head or practice pad that you have in front of you, and then we're going to drop them at the same time, like this. Notice how if I drop them at the same time, the small one reaches the head right before the big one. Notice how one of the tiny baby notes, the one right before it, is small, and the large one is consistently large. We don't want something like this, where they strike at the same time. Now let's do that with the left hand. Put the left hand high up in the air, and the right hand closer to the head. Remember to keep your baby notes baby, and your big daddy notes big. So, once you have that concept down, practice just going like this. A few rights, a few lefts. And when you want to make it more complicated, think about alternating from right to left like this. Now this is a little harder. You have to use your knowledge of using downstrokes and upstrokes. But simply stated, while the right hand in this situation is making a downstroke, the left hand is making an upstroke like this. So just practice that movement. They switch places. You do it in slow motion, like that. I always like to think of maybe a pulley below this mechanism, and it's making it to where the sticks have to be an equivalent like distance away from the head. So if you were to add up these two measures, it would equal this measure or whatever. So they kind of switch places like that. So that's a pretty hard thing to learn, the alternating flams, but it is an essential rudiment. What that looks like is this thing on the top, just 2 or 4 quarter notes that each have little grace notes or flams attached to them. So once you have that down, both playing with right hand solely, left hand solely, and then alternating strokes, we can start looking at this. And this is an applied rudiment, so the very top line requires you to play a down and a tap stroke. And you want to get out your metronome for this and set it at about, I'm going to say 100, but the 100 is where the beat, the 8th note gets the beat for 100. So I'll set it like this. So this is the 8th note, and the first line is going to sound like this. Down, up, down, up. Okay, in the second line, the right hand is pretty much doing the same thing. It's just that the left hand gets the big daddy note, where the right hand gets the baby note, just like this is the big daddy note and the baby note. Big daddy, baby, big daddy, baby. And the second line is going to sound something like this. So the second line is a little bit more complicated. It may take a little bit of work, but just pay attention to that sticking. It should be alternating sticking. And each note should be accented. Anytime we have an accent, that's when we usually have a downstroke. So with that in mind, work on this exercise both with right hand lead, which is what I have here, and a left hand lead. Once you have that down, you'll have a pretty good grasp of this rudiment. And like any of the other rudiments, you can play them slow to fast to slow. Just make sure you go at your intended tempo that is going to be comfortable for you. Don't go faster than you need to go. But you can do any of those first 3. So This line, pretty much if you just play this slow to fast to slow, that totally works as a warm-up. But I still recommend getting down the basics of it with the baby note and the big daddy note. But that is my summary of the Flam. Happy practicing.